eyes cannot see what the mind doesn't know. You see that over the period of years there has been a 360-degree change. When we started laparoscopy for cancer of the cervix, everybody was excited, but a lot of people did not like it. And in 2005 there was more criticism than acceptance to laparoscopic radical hysterectomy. From 2005 to 2018, it was only radical hysterectomy laparoscopically. So tools changed, wisdom remained, wisdom prevailed, and therefore we decided to do this. Unfortunately, on 18th of October 2018 came the trial which stopped the entire use of laparoscopy in cancer cervix. This was the LAC trial published in New England Journal, and this was there. So this is a wave of minimal invasive surgery, and this was a background to LAC trial. Please understand, the chief author of the LAC trial, Pedro Ramirez, was a very poor surgeon who hated surgeons who did very good surgery for cancer of the cervix. He came from MD Anderson, very close friend of mine, but thought that this is too much of surgery to do. So he established a trial which was beginning in 2009. At that time, there were only 2 endometrial cancers. So LAC2 trial in US conclusively proved use of laparoscopy in endometrial cancer, and the LACE trial in Australia also proved the same thing. He included all the patients up to 1B2. And whether all the centers met the criteria or no, that was not important. So the primary outcome was to find out the disease-free survival and the overall survival. Now the histology in this entire trial, the LAC trial, was completely inconsistent. There were 36 centers, but none of them reported the same kind of histology. Some had adenosquamous, some had adenocarcinoma, some had very poorly differentiated cancer, and that is the reason it was there. So you can see the post-operative histology. The margins, the positivity, the time taken, the amount of parametrium taken were not recorded. What they did was they took a video from each center and it was reviewed by the chief author. So it is, I do the trial, I review the trial, I decide, so conclusions were written before even the trial was started. So this is the site of post recurrence, and the biggest problem that the trial was stopped in 2016. So they did not complete the trial because an interim analysis showed increase in the vault recurrence and increase in the pelvic recurrences in laparoscopy. And that was a major thing. And if you see the cumulative local and regional recurrence, suddenly you saw that abdominal radical hysterectomy had better outcomes. Now understand, the same surgeon was doing abdominal radical hysterectomy and he was doing laparoscopic surgery. In my 30 years of practice, I haven't seen a surgeon who is excellent in open surgery and also excellent in laparoscopic surgery. And that was the biggest problem that we caught. There were 34 recurrences, and out of these 34 recurrences, 14 came from South America. 14 recurrences, so out of 34 centers, 14 centers had the maximum number of recurrences. The big question that the surgical community asked was, can you compare each one's surgical competence? And surgical competence is something which cannot be compared. So this is the disease-free survival, and you can see that finally the authors of LAC trial thought that the post-operative outcomes with open surgery were better. The main virtue of MIS approach was a reduction of the post-operative perioperative morbidity, but the morbidity was not much. And you can see the number of deaths that took place in laparoscopy. There were 14 deaths in laparoscopy, and there were only 4 deaths in open surgery. And the reason for conversion, which is noted if any one of you have read the trial, is failure of instrumentation, non-availability of a trained assistant. Can this be the trial which can be concluded? The confidence interval has not reached, and the conclusion was disease-free survival 4.5 years for minimal invasive surgery was inferior to the open technique, and that's it. The world got the shock. All our efforts of doing laparoscopy were shot in one bullet, and we had to stop this. This was a level 1 evidence. Nobody can go. You can be the best surgeon in the world. You have to go down because this was multi-centric, double-blind trial which was more than 10 years. And this was another trial which proved that laparoscopy is useful in endometrial cancer, and also the LACE trial. So surgical proficiency, the questions that I am raising is the surgical proficiency could not be compared. Parametrium, nobody knew about anterior parametrium. You all know that the squamous cell carcinoma spreads by the lymphatic permeation. Veins follow, the lymphatics follow the vein. The veins are in the cardinal ligament, the veins are in the anterior parametrium. Nobody cleared the anterior parametrium, and there were a lot of lag trial issues. I was one of the first who wrote to the editor that why can't we review the videos that have been seen, and it was taken down. So there were more questions then which were not answered. How many surgeons per center? And all of you will be shocked to know that every center had just 5 cases accrued per year. So how many cases did they do per month? Imagine, half. And they were considered. So and none of the centers from India, none of the centers from Europe, none of the centers from South Africa were considered who had the largest load of cancer service. Because they didn't want surgeons with group proficiency. They wanted people with low volumes, they wanted people who were not known, and no centers from Europe participated in this trial. So this was a drawback, but the trial was concluded, and the only people who are happy in India are the open gynae oncologists who shouted from the top of the roof, Shailesh, shut the stop. You have no further life in your entire career. And this was the thing. But of course, this is the evidence-based publication in favor of MIS. And these are the various international publications that were there. So when you are faced with criticism, you need to go back to the basics. Why were the failure? You have to answer this. Don't start answering by just saying, oh, you have done this, but I am a great surgeon, I never like this. I like to answer them scientifically. So we went back to the Curie and Borov classification. We have been following Peever's classification for radical hysterectomy. Now we started following Cure and Borov classification, which told us that the ureter should be the basic area and it should be divided into A1, B1, C1 hysterectomies. Update on Cure-Borov classification was taken, and these are the guidelines which were there. Then you try to understand the spread of cervical cancer. The spread of cervical cancer never takes place anteriorly because of the cervicovesical fascia, posteriorly because of the denormilious fascia. So it is only the lateral spread. And if you don't take enough parametrium, so it is this parametrium we try to analyze, and we realize that there are 3 types of parametrium. The posterior parametrium, which is the uterosacral, which is nothing but the muscular ligament, no lymphatics. Of course, the lateral parametrium, which is the McEnroe's ligament, and anterior parametrium, which is there. This is how the spread takes place. So we describe the posterior parametrium, and if you can see, this is how you can take the entire posterior parametrium, which is very, very easy to take, that is there. Then the lateral parametrium, which is very, very important because it is the uterine vein, lot of us take. But it was this anterior parametrium which I showed you yesterday in my live surgery also, that this was the parametrium which was not taken. So you try to take the parametrium very close to the vagina. Naturally, the cancer cells which are through the permeation fell down, cause vault recurrences, cause pelvic recurrences, and we describe. So this was the concept of anterior parametrium that we always had, but we never published at that point of time because we thought it is a gold standard. And this is a key step that we realized. Yesterday I showed you complete Yabuki space. If you do not show the Yabuki space, then the anterior parametrium that you take out is completely inadequate. So this is what we try to see. You can see the anterior parametrium, the hypogastric nerve, and this is what we describe. Again, when you want to take the anterior parametrium, you have to make sure that you take the uterovesical ligament or the ureteric tunnel, and then once you take the ureteric tunnel, then only the ureter will go away, and you can see amount of parametrium that you can take. This will prevent the pelvic as well as the entire vault recurrences. This is the tunnel dissection we have showed you yesterday, and this is the significance. The identification of the anterior parametrium is by the presence of inferior vesical vein, which I showed you yesterday. Repeatedly we can show you this, and this is the amount of parametrium that we do. And so much so that 2018 LAC trial was published. 2020 we said a failure of LAC trial because of anterior parametrium. The greatest aspect of United States was that the trial was published in US, but we won the Golden Telescopic Award by publishing this against the trial in spite of that. And not only did we stop, because as an Indian, nobody believes your word unless you get it published. So this was the anatomical description of anterior parametrium. Then the second thing, they use uterine manipulator. Who uses manipulator in cervical cancer? We never used it in 2005. You are pushing your cancer cells through the manipulator. We started using the uterine ridge technique. So a lot of flaws in this trial, and we published this novel uterine ridge technique. Yesterday I showed you this. This was published in 2007. And of course the colpotomy. They all opened the vagina, opening the tumor cells to the entire peritoneum, and because of the carbon dioxide, it started circulating. So we never did this colpotomy. From 2007, we have been doing Schauter's modification laparoscopically. Yesterday also I showed you a complete purse string suture, and then you do a colpotomy. Then the tumor cells are not exposed to this, and this is one of the reasons. So don't find any level 1 evidence just for your words, show it with your action. And also instead of that, we also started using stapler. If you are not used to this, then you can just use the stapler. This is the stapler, you contain the vagina, no spillage of the tumor cells. Of course, when you take the stapler, then you cut below the stapler line. And of course, you can go ahead, so that this is how you can do the containment. So this is the stapler application. And of course, if that you are not convinced, then you can also do Schauter's maneuver from below. Close the vagina before you enter the laparoscopy. So you take a purse string suture from down, close the vagina, take the angles, and you can see, then you do the laparoscopy. It is already there. So these are the modifications that we did, and we never had vault recurrences or pelvic recurrences. This must be the amount of parametrectomy you should be doing. This is how the specimen should be seen, and this is what we showed. Of course, you can see the roadmap which is seen after that, and this is how the pelvis should be cleared. Now, ladies and gentlemen, ASCO 2023, laparoscopy has been back in action, and you can clearly do laparoscopy in cancer cervix up to 1B1. This is the trial which has been published, and this shows very clearly. For all of your gynecologists, very important and a very big shock to gynae-oncologists. When you have a cervical cancer, take a biopsy. If the stromal invasion is less than 50%, no radical hysterectomy is needed. Just a plain hysterectomy is enough. And this is what you have to understand. Take a biopsy, stromal, if it is there, this is a phase 3 trial, 700 patients were recruited. If the stromal invasion is less than 50%, just a plain hysterectomy, no lymph node dissection. Big shock to all gynae-oncologists. So laparoscopy can be done, and this is the SHAPE trial here. Regardless of which arm, you can see there is a role of laparoscopy. So LAC trial is no longer relevant up to 2 centimeters, and this is how we are involved. So of course, we were dyslexic. We published this. We have the largest trial published in the literature, 1,000 patients of radical hysterectomy. You can see all these trials, and we had just 2% of vault and pelvic recurrences. But in spite of this trial, this was just a single institutional trial. We addressed this LAC trial very single-handedly, so much so that in Switzerland in 2021, after the trial, I had a back-to-back debate with Professor Ramirez. There were 1,400 people. At the end of my talk, 600 people walked up and put up their hands saying that we support what Dr. Guttamaker is saying, which was a big blow to Dr. Ramirez, who was fighting against me. So always find the trial which is there. This is the uterine vein that I showed you. This is what is now published and considered as a gold standard to identify the nerves. Take the uterine vein, medial to the ureter, and that's the entire thing which is there. This is our contribution. I still have 1 minute. Our contribution to the world literature, 90 citations of all our publications for radical hysterectomy. And of course, we also have now written an article on sentinel node biopsy using the ICG in cancer cervix. So we are now doing this sentinel node biopsy, and this is what is there. These are the protocol issues which are there. Of course, we are doing laparoscopy in advanced cancer cervix for exentration. You can see our experience, 86 cases of exentrations, which is still the largest laparoscopic exentration ever published in the world as of today. And this is the laparoscopic posterior exentration. So the answer to every question in science is not your words, is not your numbers, it is your concept. Find the concept with scientific mind, and you will see that everything is there. So all these we have done, robotic exentration, these are all our publication, and this is what is there. Now take home message, MIS is still applicable for 1A1, and take home message is, when you have a good armamentarium, it is very difficult for a scientific mind to believe that what you can see better cannot be done better. And this is what was about the lab trial. What we see better, we of course do better. And this is the most important thing. Need to change your mindset. Don't get bogged down. The problem with the Indians is we do not publish, so we perish. Publish so that you don't perish in front of the whites. The whites are always not right. We are here to teach them, and we should be teaching them in future. And this is what I always say. So complete hands-on workshop. I have trained more than 400 people on live surgery. You are welcome. And of course, I again take this opportunity to invite you for the IAG annual event, 14th to 16th of